So I went to see the poet-philosopher Derek Jensen speak not long ago, and he didn't give his usual NCIV talk, and he didn't give the deep green resistance talk that he normally gives. He gave one that was specifically tailored to an art college. And so he's speaking to these art students about the stories that their art is supposed to tell, and, you know, how he is a person who's considered an artist, you know, uses stories to paint new ways of thinking about the world. That was interesting to me because, you know, he said things, that's what I appreciate about him, is how he kind of breaks down things that are sometimes wrapped in theoretical language into really, I don't know, layman's talk. He talked about how being social creatures, human beings learn through stories. So we tell each other these stories to pass on lessons and knowledge and ways of behaving. And since hearing that talk, I've begun to think about, like, stories that are told all the time. And this has also happened just because, you know, I've become incredibly, you know, unwilling to just put up with the bullshit of the society we live in, you know, just unwilling to deal with it anymore. Like, there's a certain level you'll put up with for your, you know, I need to do this to eat, I need to do this so I can do this, kind of compromises you make. But, you know, on a personal level, I'm not willing to deal with people who are so wrapped up in, like, myths and lies that you can't even have an honest conversation with them. So, anyway, I'm reading this book, Gynecology, by the radical feminist theologian Mary Daly, which, for its flaws in terms of Eurocentrism, I think is worth reading regardless. And it struck me, like, just how deep a lot of these lies go. And I can see, you know, sometimes when people cling really hard to the myths that they were taught as, you know, as youth, and the myths they're continually taught throughout, you know, the society we live in. It's hard because everything's telling you that that's just the truth and that's just the way it is and that's how you were taught. So it's hard to just, you know, give it up. But I thought this was a good way of giving up something sacred to some people. So I was a fan of the book The Giving Tree as a child, like a lot of people were. Read it a lot, always cried, always thought it was like just this beautiful story of friendship. But Mary Daly writes about it in her book Gynecology, and she really dismantles it in terms of a beautiful story of friendship and what it's really about. So I'm going to read from that. Children's books provide chilling evidence of mind control through dismembering myth. Fairy tales are particularly gruesome examples. An apparently genteel, contemporary type of disguised mind-dismembering myth for children is exemplified in The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. It is the story of a tree, consistently referred to by the pronoun she, who gives absolutely everything she has to a boy. This begins innocently enough with her shade, leaves, and fruit. But the boy grows up and cuts off her branches and then her trunk. Finally, in his old age, he uses her stump as a seat. As a result of all this non-reciprocated giving, the tree is happy. The jacket blurb of this book, published in 1964, but still a big seller, describes it as a tender story, a moving parable for readers of all ages. The story, in fact, is one of female rape and dismemberment. It draws upon sources in the background of female identity. taking the tree of life, who is the goddess, and making her a willing participant in her own mutilation, which makes her happy. Her degradation is total, for the giving tree wallows in self-destruction. Here is a model of masochism for female readers of all ages, and of sadism for boys of all ages. This chilling children's tale is an extension of Christian myth. It is a super-refined, invasive, and deceptive offspring of self-satisfied secularists, secure in their superiority to Christian crudity. The saccharine, sweet story of a little boy who loves a tree, a young Apollo who crowns himself with her leaves, has healthier appeal than overt S&M biblical tales of a dead God-man crowned with thorns. Thus the post-Christian, that is pre-Christian, parable has deceptive acceptability, extending its tentacles into unaware minds, guiding them to a more primal fatherland, inhabited by paradigms of patriarchal matricide. It thus brings its parental purchasers and readers into unwitting compliance and primary programming for genocide. Whether or not the authors, illustrators, and promoters of such books understand that they are communicating genocidal messages is beside the point, since self-deception is of the essence of doublethink. They undoubtedly would respond with incredulity, amusement, indignation to such an analysis, for they themselves have been programmed not to recognize genocidal reversals. Within the massive public relations business of patriarchy, the promotion of rape and dismemberment has top priority, and it is essential that the promoters make this fact invisible to everyone, especially to themselves. As George Orwell wrote of his character Winston Smith in 1984, for the first time he perceived that if you want to keep a secret, you must also hide it from yourself.